Welcome to our Google Hangout tonight. I'm Dr. Jeff Hale, and on the line with me tonight is Dr. Renee Hale. And we're going to be talking about how great decisions get made, and we're featuring this book, How Great Decisions Get Made, 10 Easy Steps. Can you read that, Renee?
Sure. 10 easy steps for reaching agreement on even the toughest issues.
Absolutely. It's backwards for me.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about how great decisions get made. And you know what? 32 years ago, I made a great decision. And that decision was to marry Renee Hale. And it was Renee Norris at that time. So today is our 32nd wedding anniversary, and so we're celebrating a really great decision today.
We sure are. This is a good way to do it too.
Awesome. Yes, and just so you're not too concerned, we do have a getaway planned. We just couldn't get away today. But
that's right.
Next week, we're looking forward to that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So, 10 great ways to make decisions, or 10 steps that are involved in making great decisions. I want to call your attention to our blog, WellSpiritConsulting.com. Go there and go to the blog, and you'll find two posts there. One is entitled How Great Decisions Get Made, and the other is titled How Making Great Decisions from Fear to Hope. And these blog posts really form the foundation of our discussion tonight. We've already been blogging about this, and we have been broadcasting it on our radio program, Leaders Alive, which you can tune into every Thursday at 5 o'clock p.m. on WJLB.
First and third Thursdays. It's only the
first and third Thursday. Good. Yes. At 5 o'clock p.m. on WJOB. That's 12:30 a.m. in Hammond, Indiana. So we've been having quite a bit of discussion around this topic already. And so if you want to catch up, go read on our blog post, and that'll bring you up to speed to where we're starting on this decision as we actually delve into the 10 steps more in depth. So let's start with an overview of what these 10 steps are. So Renee, what about the first one?
Well, the first step is really called enlist everyone. Enlist everyone, and what that really means is get people involved. If there's someone that has even the smallest part in the project itself, or the smallest part in solving the potential problem, then you need to go ahead and get them on board, inform them, keep them in the loop, and then for those that are even closer to the project, go ahead and pull them in, and whatever the decision is, make sure they're sitting around the table. So you want to enlist everyone. Don't leave anyone out.
Absolutely. And step 2 is discover, share hopes. And this is a step that Renee and I particularly like, and we use it with our clients quite often. Often the very first thing that we do with a client is try to surface what the hopes are for a particular project. And what you find, particularly when you're working with a group of people, is that as you start to articulate what you hope for in terms of the outcomes of being able to work together or to reach a decision, that you discover that there's really a whole lot of common ground there, that really we're working towards a lot of the same things. And sometimes we'll even surface some things that you say, wow, I haven't thought about that, but you know, yeah, that's really what we're after too. So it becomes a very, very powerful step in identifying our hopes and overcoming our fears about the decision-making process. So tell us about step 3, Renee.
Step 3 is uncovering the real issues, and what that means is you really need to listen to what everyone has to say about it. And in practical terms, that means going around the table and letting everyone speak, and don't cut them off, let them finish. And then also, after a person finishes, have someone, preferably the next person in line to speak. It could be anybody. Just paraphrase what that person said, just to make sure that everybody heard it. And so this can take a little bit of time at this point. Time well spent, because you're setting the foundation for a great decision. You need to really uncover what the real issues are at hand.
Right. And the fourth step is, once we've identified what the real issues are, then we begin to surface all the possible options for dealing with those issues, or that most important issue, the underlying issue. Oftentimes we come to decision making with a limited set of ideas of how something can be solved, but if we allow ourselves to really be open to putting everything on the table and going around and listening to everybody and letting everybody put an option on the table, and doing that until you've exhausted all the possible options for dealing with that issue, then you can see some innovation and some creativity start to emerge, which takes us to the fifth step.
Right, and number 5 is gathering the right information. I think that maybe this is one of the steps that gets cut short sometimes, is gathering all the pieces that you need to make a good decision. Sometimes you sit around the table and people say, after talking through a little bit about what it is, then they'll say, oh, well, before we can go any further, we really need to know these other things. So gather the information that you know you'll need. Sometimes it's not just you, the leader. You have to get some people and say, what else do we need to bring to this meeting so that we can get it on the table to make the right decision. So gathering the right information.
Right, and once we gather the right information, then it's important to get everything on the table. And that involves looking at all the options and really explaining both the pros and the cons to every option, and still holding ourselves open to listen to what the pros and cons are to everything before jumping quickly to making a decision. And that leads us to step 7.
Right. 7 is write down the choices that support the shared hopes. So now you've had a chance to talk through some things and get stuff out there, and so now you're going to find out what each person thinks about the choices. They can list what they think looks best to them, and acceptable alternatives. And then what that does is it just kind of gives you a preliminary look at how things are shaping up. So it's kind of like a rough draft, if you will.
And often it involves actually using secret ballot voting on the different options. And once you do that, then you can begin to map out solutions, because people have actually voted on without any sense of peer pressure whatsoever, because it's all secret, and getting out what they see the really most viable options are for dealing with this. And then you can begin to map those solutions out, and seeing that, well, hey, most people actually think this might be the most viable option, but then there's still a pretty good group of people that think this might be the most viable option. And maybe there's even a third where a good number of people have grouped around that. So what you emerge there is we begin to see maybe 2 or 3 really strong options for dealing with a situation emerge, which takes us to step 9.
Right. Well, we were talking just then about mapping solutions, right?
Right.
Okay, so I think the really good thing about mapping the solutions is, first of all, it can be totally anonymous, like you said, and then you get a chance to think about things with, like you said, without the pressure of people judging what you thought, and that leads to great freedom then in the next thing, which is looking ahead. So before you get ready to rush off to some particular solution, you can back up a little bit and look at how some of those solutions compare to others. You can really take time to look ahead and compare, again, without knowing names and stuff that were attached to the previous things. It just gives a great sense of freedom to get excited about the future and the possibilities that are ahead.
Yeah. And then coming to a decision on a step that you're actually going to implement, but then looking ahead also to have a backup plan.
Right.
So that you're not just running ahead with only one, putting all your eggs in one basket, but that you've actually thought through, okay, well, if this option doesn't work, what's our next best option? And you already have it primed and ready to launch if that
Right.
doesn't work out.
Right, so like Plan B.
Right, absolutely. And then you come to, once you actually get involved in implementing that solution, number 10 is very important. You got to stay charged up. You've got to stay in really behind this solution that you have decided to implement, and marshal your forces around that and keep people enthusiastic and excited and engaged and see it through to the end. So those are our 10 steps. That's the overview. And tonight we're going to go deeper into steps 1 through 5. And then next week, next Thursday night, we'll pick it up and talk about steps 6 through 10 in depth. So, are you ready to start, Renee?
I'm ready to go. I'm ready.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to share my screen here because I have a slide presentation about this. And so we'll start that. And we'll talk through this together. So, you want to start here with step 1, Renee?
Right. When you enlist everyone, that means that you have to take the time to identify the interests of each person in the group, and because each one of them has a stake in the outcome usually. If they don't have a stake in the outcome, then they're probably not in the room. If you have a question about whether or not to involve someone, you should always err on the side of inclusion. So if you have someone in there that after the first meeting they realize, oh, we probably shouldn't be here, or you realize that, then you can address that. But it's better to bring everybody possible in that you think might have a stake in that or a reason to be there. Invite anyone that does have useful information. Remember to keep it wide at the start. You should always have your net cast wide and bring in a lot. You can always narrow that down. It's far better to let people drop out of the process if they discover that they won't be affected by the result than to make them into enemies by excluding them from the beginning. The last thing you want to do is create an atmosphere of secrecy around things. That only leads to mistrust. So make sure that those who should be present at a meeting are there, and then cast your net even wider, even to people that you might even think have a slight need to be there.
Here's a couple of, several questions that you might consider when thinking about who to enlist. The first one is, who needs to make the final decision? Certainly, that person or those people need to be involved.
Right.
And then, who needs to implement the decision? Certainly, they should be involved. Anybody that's got to implement this decision should be involved in coming to what that decision is.
You know what? Let's stop right there for a minute. That,
Yeah.
I think, is one of the biggest mistakes people make. in organizations and businesses is making decisions that they want others to implement, and then just handing down the decision, and the people that have to implement that don't know why, or they disagree with it, either one or both. And that's too bad, because the message that sends is, your opinion about this doesn't matter. You're just supposed to do what we tell you to do. And you know, that is it's just not a very nice thing to do. Now, I know that there are different levels in an organization, and when you're talking about, let's say, someone who is going to go out and dig a special hole for some special thing in the backyard of someone's home, and you know, you're working on the side and you've got a little crew and they come in. Well, it's easy to see in a case like that, you're going to stand around maybe and talk about how that thing goes, and then maybe you're going to call over the two guys that are going to dig, and you're going to say, okay, you guys need to dig here and here. Now, that's a real simple thing that they really didn't need to be in on that decision making. They were just waiting to see where they were supposed to dig. That's different from more complex decisions in organizations where people are expected to do things a certain way with other people, with customers, over time, and in more complex situations. So it's not every case, you know, that you have to explain exactly why, but people that implement would like to be involved in the decision-making process as much as possible so they can understand the why behind it. That's always important for people.
Absolutely. And also, not only just the people who have to implement, but also the people who the decision will affect. You know, for example, if I am a business owner and I'm making decisions, my decisions will affect my customers. They may not have to implement my decision, but they will certainly be affected by my decision. So to what degree might I involve my customers in certain decisions that I have to make?
Well, we do have customer surveys that we all fill out from time to time, and that's why, right there.
So those are three good questions that you should ask yourself. Who will make the final decision? Who needs to implement the decision? And whom will the decision affect? So let's move on and go on to another slide here, which will be step 2. And step 2 is discovering shared hopes. And one of the things that we really enjoy doing is, particularly when we're working with a group of people, is to give everybody a stack of paper, about a half an inch or even an inch of paper, and give everybody 3 minutes to write one hope per page. So everybody starts to write, and at the end of 3 minutes they have a stack of hopes that they have written. And then we have everyone share those hopes with the full group. We'll start out with one person, and they'll share their first hope, and then we'll ask, does anyone else have a hope similar to this? And often you will see that yes, they may have worded it slightly differently, but it's roughly the same thing, and you begin to see those shared hopes emerge. And as you go around and let everybody share, some common themes begin to emerge that you can identify. And really checking out whether each person supports the hopes of the other participants. You'll begin to feel that as the group talks about their hopes. You will see that whether or not people are really connecting with what other folks are saying. And so sometimes you may have to dig a little bit deeper and ask people to explain exactly what they mean by a certain hope. If you sense that there may be a person or a couple of people who don't seem to connect with a particular hope. So you want to make sure that as you go through the process that everybody has a chance to fully understand what the others mean as they present their hopes.
Right. The other thing I wanted to say about going back to when they actually write it down on the piece of paper,
Yeah.
by going through and having an unlimited stack of paper in front of you, it helps you feel unlimited in the number of hopes you can have for something, and it's a very freeing feeling to just go one page at a time and just get as many out there that come to your mind at the time. Just one word will do on the page. Sometimes you use more than one word, but an example, let's just give a nuts and bolts example for a minute so people get an idea. Say there's a new product in development and at a place that manufactures something that consumers use, and there is a very special project team on this thing, whatever it is, on this gadget, and they're at the beginning of the project, and they have some stuff done, but they're going to have to make some crucial decisions coming up here in the next few weeks so that they can go into major design, production, whatever. So as they write their hopes down, some of those hopes might be make X number of dollars to push the company into the next bracket of revenues. That might be one. That is really concrete and quantitative, right? But then there might be others like get to know my team members and feel more like a unified team here at the company. So that's what some people would call a softer side. But hopes are everything from the nuts and bolts of doing it and quantitative things you can evaluate in a quantitative way, all the way to qualitative things that make so much difference in the way that people work together and the outcomes of the project, and yet they're rarely measured in a quantitative way. So getting it out there and talking about it right up front just really helps a lot.
Yeah, it does. So let's get back to the slides here. And then you can use your hopes to focus your discussions. We're assuming that many times that working out a problem issue or making a decision is going to require more than one meeting together. And so once you surface your hopes, then your hopes really become like your North Star. This is where we want to end up. This is the kind of experience that we want to have. This is the kind of results that we want to see. And so your hopes can help you focus your discussions. But in order to do this successfully, you really have to let go of your need to jump to outcomes quickly and to jump to solutions quickly. You have to give your hopes time to come alive in what you're doing. And so you can also use your hopes to evaluate opportunities and to track your group's progress. Are we actually, is this progress, is this process that we're engaged in actually taking us in a direction that's going to fulfill the things that we say that we really hope for? So that takes us to step 3, which is uncovering the real issues.
Mm-hmm.
So Renee, you want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite things to do, is uncovering the real issues. So you set aside solving the problem for a minute and you focus on issue finding. So here's what I love about what the author says here. Don't let the rush to solve a problem distract you from uncovering the real issue. Allow enough time for the power of listening. You need to ask everybody to express their thoughts and feelings in turn. In this way, sometimes underlying issues are brought to the surface, and those are the very things that you have to address in order to solve the problem.
All right. Let me break in here just a second, Renee, because what I want to underline here is that this process is really requires discipline. It's a disciplined process to make towards making decisions, and frankly, what we experience many times in organizations is really a very, very undisciplined approach to processing problems. In fact, often there is no real approach to it. It's just who can assert their point of view more strongly. And this process really requires discipline because it requires you not to rush to a solution, but to actually walk through a process that will take you to the best solutions or the better solutions. Anything you have to say about that as you move on through this, Renee?
No, that sounds good. I'm ready to go to the next point.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important for you to express what you think or feel using I statements to avoid judging others. So an example of that is you can say, I feel as if this is happening, or I am thinking that it might be better to look at this first before we actually get to the problem that is our outcome-based thing. Instead of saying, well, you seem to be aiming down this for this other thing, or you are, you're this or you're that, or you obviously have an interest in that, because when you start using you, it becomes very accusatory. No matter how you intend it to sound, whenever you start with that, it does sound accusatory. It's just the nature of our English language, the nature of how we speak. It's going to come across wrong every time. So I recommend in meetings like that where you're doing decision making, don't ever start with you. And then the next thing that just came up is listen without leading to debate or solutions. So you can say, instead of saying you this, you can say, I'm hearing it this way, but I want to make sure I heard it well, so I'm going to listen. Let me listen again. And so you're going to listen all the way through, and then you're going to reflect back on what you hear. And so instead of making a commentary on it, that's what it means by don't editorialize. You can say, hey, I think, again, start with yourself, I think I'm hearing this. Is that correct? I mean, you've got to really be respectful, right, of others, and then you are also respected in turn, and that way everybody gets, a chance to really surface what's inside. Ask the speaker, the person who's speaking, whether you have accurately reflected what he or she wants to say. So, you don't make accusations too about what they just said. That's then you can kind of disintegrate into even something as bad as name calling. I've seen it happen. So.
Yeah, and one of the things that we often do is we start with one person in the group and we let them speak without anybody else interrupting at all.
Right.
There's no commentary, no reflection on it at all by the group. everyone has to sit and listen to what this person has to say. And then you move to the next person, and then what we ask the next person to do is to reflect back and say, this is what I heard Jeff say, or this is what I think I heard you saying. Is this correct? And then when you clarify that you've got that correct, then you build on that statement to say what that person would like to say. And so you move around the group again in a disciplined and orderly fashion where everyone has the freedom to speak without fear of being interrupted and without fear of being opposed, and so that they can lay out exactly what they would like to say.
Now, Jeff, isn't that part of Robert's Rules of Order, too, that people don't talk over each other in meetings?
I think that is part of Robert's Rules of Order, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But the groups that actually use Robert's Rules and Rules of Order are far and few between in my experience.
Mm-hmm.
So then when you get everything out there on the table, you begin to look for that underlying issue that the group needs to address right now.
Now, Jeff, how long does it take to get to that?
Well, usually I find that you can do that in one session, typically,
Right.
of going around that. Things begin to surface if you are creating a situation where people can speak honestly and frankly. Because one of the real benefits of this is it requires you to test your assumptions. You may come in thinking, oh, this is the problem, and it may very well be a problem. But as you really talk about it and uncover these issues, you find out that there's several things behind that. Like you could be thinking, oh, we're seeing declining revenue. Declining revenue is the problem. Well, as you step back from that, what you might see is actually there may be either a customer service problem, a distribution problem, something else that's actually behind that. The revenue is not really a problem, it's a symptom of the problem. And that's what this process allows you to do.
Okay.
So that takes us on to the next step, which is identifying all the options. So now that we've aired out what the issues are and discovered the major issue that we really need to focus on, now is the time to talk about all the possible options to address that particular issue. And in this, you want to use a brainstorming kind of approach to stimulate new ideas. After you've identified that issue, probably you're going to take a break and maybe have a day or so between having identified that issue, and then you're going to come back at another meeting. You can think about some metaphors, some creative things that you could do to help you stimulate new ideas around that solution and bring that to the group at that time. Again, it's a very disciplined process. You restate the issue. This is the issue that we have discovered in our last session together, and then you invite each person in turn to state one option that they see for dealing with that. And again, as they're putting their option on the table, this is not the time to debate the option or even to comment on the option, pro or con. And again, here when we talk about expanding perspectives using logic and creativity and intuition, that's not saying, okay, somebody's put an option on the table and now I'm going to give you my opinion as to whether or not I think it's good or bad. That's to take maybe an option that has been put on the table, and how would you take that option and extend its logic, or to think about that option in another creative way, or what does your intuition tell you about that option that might actually transform that base option into a new idea. And so what you want to do is you continue to brainstorm until you've really exhausted all the options, and you just keep circling the room, circling the room. And let me just say this about the process. You may be thinking, well, wow, isn't that boring? I mean, you know, only one person speaking at a time and going about it in a very orderly fashion. Isn't that a whole lot more boring than just letting people, you know, talk as they will and throw out ideas just sort of willy-nilly? And I think what you'll find when you actually do this is that the things that come forth are so thoughtful and so stimulating that you won't find it boring at all. Because
right. Well, let me just say, I get so excited when you say that, because it gives a chance for those people who are less outgoing in a meeting setting. It lets all of them be heard, because everybody gets a chance to give their part. And sometimes if you didn't have that discipline and that diligence for that intentionality, you would never hear what those people had to say, because they would be talked over by everyone else that's, you know, big talkers and dominant personalities. So it's a way that you really get to hear things you might not be able to hear in any other way.
Right. So once you've identified all the options, then you create a list of what the group believes to be the most viable options that are worthy of further investigation. And so what if you have an option where you think, well, we're not really sure whether this is viable or not. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Put it on the list.
Right.
You know, if you haven't totally discounted something, put it on the list and to get more information about. Which leads us to the next step, which is gathering the right information.
Yeah. So use your hopes to focus your information gathering. Once you've got those hopes out, you can orient your information gathering around the way each option supports your hopes. So they're kind of like a filter, right?
Absolutely.
Right. Then you need to avoid setting up factional dynamics and advocating particular positions, like, in other words, catering people's agendas. Instead, keep your focus on solving that problem, making the decision that serves the outcome that you want.
Right. And one way to
Go
let me
ahead.
just break in here and say one way to do that is just to create a grid, sort of, where you list all your hopes on one side of the page. Say on the left-hand side of the page, you list all your hopes, and then across the top, you list your possible options, and then just going down that grid, you say, okay, option 1 supports hope 1 in what way, you know, and then option 1 supports hope 2 in what way.
Right. So
You
then,
may find that, hey, it doesn't support hope 2 at all. So, you know, that's okay too. But that's what you want to do, is to look at, okay, how do our hopes, how do our options support our hopes? And so if you've got one, if you can identify one option that is enabling you to reach all or most of your hopes, that might be pointing you towards being the better solution.
right. And what this means by what the wording factional dynamics and advocating particular positions, it might not be someone's agenda. It might just be that somebody very dominant is really good at a certain thing, and they'd like to do whatever that thing is to solve this problem. But maybe whatever that is doesn't really serve well here, and it's okay if it doesn't. It's okay. Okay, so the next thing is create diverse groups to gather information to strengthen learning. I think it's really important not to get just one stream of information, but to get your information from a lot of different sources, and it comes then from different angles. You have experts, you have people that are somewhat into the field, you have others. So you just need to make sure that you find out how others have dealt with this as well, whatever the issue is. Just get a lot of information from a lot of different places. Don't rely on just one source.
And also, it's about how you put your information gathering groups together. I mean, oftentimes we make the mistake of saying, okay, well, we want to gather information about this particular option, and this particular option has an emphasis on finances. So we're going to put all of the people with financial expertise to explore this option.
Right.
But
Where it
the
might be better
problem
to
with that
have.
is that they will only look at it through their financial expertise.
Right, and they only see it from that viewpoint. Whereas
Right.
you might have a small group that has a finance person and then others, so that
Right.
when they're looking for that information, the others are going to ask questions. That maybe the finance person find it second nature or something, or they're going to make assumptions that the other people won't. So yeah, it's good to have those different viewpoints.
Absolutely.
Right. Then the next thing, learn relevant information from others. So don't try to reinvent the wheel every time on every single part of what you're doing. Find out others who have dealt with this information and find out how they dealt with it. And that also can sometimes come with evaluation. So you can find out how their ideas worked. And maybe you came up with something similar and you'd say, oh, I see how these people did it this way, and it didn't work out well for these reasons. So let's take that into account, you know, in choosing an option that has that in it. So that's good. Learn from other people. And then finally, be focused, not exhaustive. You need to have just enough to understand how each option addresses your key hopes. When you're bringing information, you know, you don't have to have every last single detail and possibility, but you have to have enough so that you can understand. So that's also very important.
Yes, it is. And so I think that brings us to the end of our 5 steps tonight, and we've really enjoyed being with you. And we look forward to being with you next week, where we'll talk about steps 6 through 10. And we'll also be talking about that on Leaders Alive next Thursday, 5 o'clock, WJOB, 12:30 a.m., Hammond, Indiana. And we hope you'll join us for that broadcast. If you don't make the broadcast, then join us here for this Google Hangout again next Thursday night. So until next time, thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again. Have a good evening.